Welcome to another episode of Red and Black, where your conservatism is not just the color that you used to. I'm Lenny McAllister with an Olympic-sized challenge for my three wonderful guest hosts, starting with the lady with the glasses, Kira Davis, who's now some international star because she's been made a GIF, which we'll get into in a little bit. But you still do have a challenge. You're not too popular or famous to not have a challenge. So your challenge, ma'am, if you choose to accept it, is to go the whole episode without saying this phrase. Recall Gavin Newsom.
Can't do it. Recall Gavin Newsom. See, I already lost. I can't do it. Recall Gavin Newsom. Recall Gavin Newsom. I got some very encouraging poll numbers today, which are embargoed right now. So as we record, hopefully by the time this drops, they'll be out. But let me just say that the numbers are looking very good for the recall crowd. And if you feel like Newsom looks like he's sweating, he's literally sweating. He's in big, big trouble.
Good.
I'm not used to wearing a face mask, and it's finally dripping all over the net. I digress. Mr. Charles, I have an Olympic-sized challenge for you. You can't say two things. The first thing you can't say is conservative ink. Which I haven't really said, but
that's going to hurt.
Yeah, I know. And the other thing you can't say in honor of what you graced us with today is, this is my natural hair. You're not allowed to say that this week.
Jeff's great-great-great-great-grandmama is Native American, y'all.
She is Cherokee, y'all.
There you go.
See, y'all Negroes ruined that for the rest of us. All y'all have been lying about it.
So
They're like, oh yeah, I descend from Native American royalty, knowing good and hell well there ain't nothing Native American or royal about your asses. So you ruin it for people like me who actually do descend from Native. It's horrible. Y'all just jealous. That's what's happening.
Just hating. Hateration.
On my mom's side. If you look at my grandmother and her grandmother's grandmothers, you'll see it.
I believe you.
Your grandmother's name was Whitefoot, right? Yeah.
Ooh, sure, why not?
Catching Lightning Whitefoot was her name.
Yeah. That's a little bit too long.
Well,
anyways, I would like to say, though, for the record, since we're recording now, Jeff, your hair looks really good.
It does.
Yeah.
And Jeff, for the record, I'm going to say it since we're recording now. What's her name?
Oh, my God. Oh, mind your business.
I'm going to get it out of him.
Yeah, look, y'all. This is what happens when people become famous. If you all remember when we first started this show, first of all, remember he used to wear a hat all the time on this show. The more that his profile has raised up, brother got a haircut. Now all of a sudden it grows out of his hair like this. He got the good hair, and he got some Native American, his grandmama's Cherokee, and everything else. And he can't disclose what her name is.
Yep. See,
that's
next
right.
thing you know, Jeff is
mostly because she doesn't exist, but still.
Or she lives up in Canada.
Yeah, probably.
Perhaps.
They're all Canadian. Hey, we broadcast everywhere. There's a challenge for you. Yours is simple. It is one phrase. I don't think you're going to be able to get through the show without saying it yourself. Okay? Now, Mr. Wonderful, fantastic, most interesting man on Red and Black, you're very talented, but I don't think you can do this. Well, let's see if you can. You ready? Your phrase to avoid the Olympic-sized challenge for you is to go through this episode without saying, sit your ass down somewhere.
I can't do that.
See, I thought it was going to be boy bye.
Yeah.
No, that was a number 2.
Okay.
I went with number 1.
No, sit your ass down somewhere, lady.
See? Case in point.
We can't do it.
We're
not athletes. We're not athletes.
We're not
We're
athletes.
disciplined enough.
You are, but you're in the top 1. You're 1%ers in a very good way. Not in the other type of way, in a good way. You're the creme de la creme.
Okay, I'll take that.
Creme de la creme.
Creme de la creme. Unlike certain people, and I'm going to keep everybody on the screen to start this. Unlike certain people that are chief executives of the Empire State. Because their behavior, and I'm going to go to Dr. Metzler first because I want a little bit of a lingo angle, political angle, then I'm going to go to the pundits, but I'm not taking anybody off screen. Dr. Metzler, we kind of saw this unraveling with Cuomo and slowly but surely unraveling. This seems to be the death knell when now the General Assembly is saying, you will go or we will pack your bags for you and we will toss you out as you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, the investigation, just so folks are not confused, the investigation that Tish did was a workplace harassment investigation, completely civil, no criminal charges. Now, some DAs are asking for information so they could possibly engage in a criminal investigation. The interesting thing about impeachment here is, if in fact he is impeached because the assembly pretty much wants him impeached, he would not be the first Democrat to be impeached. In 1913, and I was there, by the way, William Sulzer was impeached. Part of the reason he was impeached was fraud, corruption, and get this, it also included a woman. The difference was she sued him for making a promise to marry her in 1900, which he did not marry her. So she sued him. And during the investigation, under oath, he lied about it. So a woman was involved, Democrat, impeached. There you go.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
You can always count on a historian for those type of ties there. But I'm going to go to two aspects of it. Kira, I'm going to go to you now, and let's start with this. Cuomo didn't seem as though he had aspirations to go past governor. One point in time, they were talking about him as being America's governor. Maybe not this time last year, more like April, May of 2020, when the COVID cases were really spiking. And he tried to go after Trump a little bit, but then he waned. And it seems as though he's been floundering and left himself vulnerable. And then when you push back hard and say there's nothing there, and then this happens, you're kind of done, especially when, by the way, they made Andrew Cuomo so high profile because of Chris Cuomo on CNN, CNN had Andrew Cuomo on in the morning and then had him on with his brother at night, which only made him more vulnerable to what's going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think early on when some of this sexual harassment stuff came up, which I know Jeff is going to talk about this, so I'll leave him to this point about this versus nursing homes. But I think when it came up in the beginning, there were a lot of pundits who said, he's probably just going to stick this out. The only thing that's going to be a death knell to his future aspirations is if Biden comes out and condemns him, which Biden obviously did not do all through 2020 and up until this week. Now his press sec tried to walk it back a little bit, but he had to get out there with a statement saying, I think he should resign. And that was it. That was the final nail in the coffin. Now Cuomo can still wait this out, and he might be arrogant enough to try that. But as far as his political capital moving forward, he's been condemned by the president of the United States. So I don't think that there's a chance he's ever going to make it to the White House. And that's the only other place to go once you've been the governor of a state, as far as like high profile jobs or even in an administration. He's just tainted goods right now. And frankly, Chris Cuomo should be too. No one should take him seriously anymore as a journalist or as whatever he calls himself. He should be embarrassed and ashamed. Of course, we know CNN doesn't have much shame these days, but the Cuomo brothers really should be done in the political sphere. They have been exposed as hypocrites, and Chris Cuomo, especially as someone who is in this industry, I think that he's an embarrassment to our industry. And he should never have been allowed to be the person to cover his brother's stories or to talk with his brother. Don't tell us Like, we're not idiots. Don't tell us that, oh, we keep that part of our lives separate. It's perfectly professional. Like, don't tell us that. Of course, now we've seen emails between Chris and CNN higher ups that said, hey, maybe you should take a leave of absence while you advise your brother on this very controversial issue. And he was basically was like, I don't have to do anything. I'm a Cuomo. I'll do what I want.
Mhm.
So I hope they both pay the price. We'll see. I think this is going to be interesting to see if Cuomo gets dragged out kicking and screaming, or if he just like tapes himself to the chair.
Well, and Jeff, let me ask this question, because there's something to be said about what Kara said, which is when the president of the United States condemns you and says, yes, you should resign, and says that in front of a microphone himself, that's problematic. This is also the first scratch and sniff president that we've had in American history that has its own history of going around kissing people, hugging people, and sniffing people. So when that person says it, after some of the other things we had, look, we have had over the last several years, and I'm not trying to disparage anybody, I'm just trying to show a little bit of the humanity. We have had Biden with his issues. We have had Trump with his issues. We have had Obama with his issues, which came on the heels of Bush 43 overcoming substance abuse and alcoholism, which came on the heels of Bill Clinton. So this is 30 years of American people kind of used to an American president not necessarily having the moral authority to tell anybody anything about anything. So is it really as much of a death knell that Biden said something as it might have been, let's say, 50 years ago? And even though you go back 50, 60 years ago, you're talking about Kennedy, and that's a whole new thing. But do you understand my point? It doesn't run the same way it might have previously.
You know, I still think it carries a lot of weight. I do. I mean, I do. I mean, it's especially because presidents don't normally weigh in on this stuff in the way that Biden did. I was actually surprised that he straight out said he needs to resign. I would have expected him to say something, but I didn't expect him to go that far. And there's so much to the story. I'm going to try not to filibuster, but I have so much to say about this. There's so many different levels to this whole thing. I mean, with Governor Cuomo,
Hold on, wait a minute. Brothers get real chatty when they get a nice haircut and they got secret girlfriends all over the place. But go ahead. There's your time.
Fair enough.
You don't have to be jealous. You're married. It's okay.
Go ahead.
But here's the thing. The activist media did with Cuomo the exact same thing that they did with Michael Avenatti. They elevated this guy. They served as his public relations firm. He got free PR from them. He had his book. I mean, they were touting him. They were like, oh, this guy is taking it to Trump. He's the anti-Trump. Same thing that they did with Avenatti. And he turned out to be a sleaze. And the thing is, there were warning signs with Cuomo, unlike with Avenatti. I mean, Avenatti came off as a sleaze, but there was no real evidence of it at first. With Cuomo, there was already some stuff going on. People were already talking about not just sexual harassment, but just how he abused people in general. Like how he treated people, how he would use his position to intimidate people that didn't even work for him too. Like even with Bill de Blasio and members of his staff. Cuomo is just a sleaze. He's a scumbag. I mean, that's basically what's happening here. And then, like Kira alluded to, you had the whole thing with the nursing home scandal. And if this does take him down, I'm glad that he's gotten taken down. But I was trying to tell people on Twitter, this should have just been the icing on the cake. They should have been talking about impeachment when he killed seniors. And I get that. And I don't think that he meant to do it. At the same time, when you exhibit that level of incompetence, people were advising him not to force elderly people to live with COVID patients in the same building. So it's not like he didn't have any warning. He was reckless. He was negligent. He made horrible decisions and people died because of it. That right there should get somebody impeached. But with the political atmosphere that we're living in right now, it just doesn't. And then there's a whole Me Too aspect of this. And I wrote a piece earlier today. And I'm wondering, is Cuomo going to kill the Me Too movement? Because it's already kind of weak as it is. It started out strong and pretty much everybody was on board with it. And then people on the left started weaponizing it. They hijacked it and they started using it for their own purposes. They tried to use it against Brett Kavanaugh. That was the last time it was really big in the media. So that's already left a really bad taste in people's mouths. If Cuomo doesn't go, and by the way, I don't think he's going to resign. I think if he does go, he's going to go kicking and screaming and it's going to be impeachment. If the impeachment doesn't work and he stays in office, I don't see how Me Too survives. But then on the other hand, even if he is removed, I still don't see how it survives, because guess who helped him deal with these allegations? Two big prominent leaders in the Me Too movement, the members of Time's Up. They helped him with this letter that he was supposed to have been writing that was going to besmirch one of his accusers. And I'm like, wait, what happened to believe all women? You shouldn't even want to be caught in the same room as this guy, because it's one thing if it was just one person. He had multiple accusations against him. You might want to play it safe at the very least, even if you think he might be telling the truth, because this is a horrible look for this movement. And really, this movement was always going to die because of how it had been politicized. Well, so I think that Cuomo's ouster, if it happens, it's going to have further ramifications other than who's going to be the next governor of New York.
Well, let's go to two things, Dr. Metzler. Number one, part of the reason why you couldn't necessarily bounce Cuomo out in 2020 for the nursing home situation is because you had other Democratic governors doing the same exact thing. They were doing it here in Pennsylvania, and the health secretary now works for the Biden administration. So if you're going to bounce Cuomo for that, you got to bounce a lot of other people, right, Dr. M? And the other thing that Jeff said that I kind of want to bounce off of both you and then Kara, which is, would Cuomo kill the Me Too movement? Isn't that the whole reason why Biden spoke up? Because if you don't have something like the Me Too movement, you don't have Me Too voters in a midterm election that usually goes against the White House.
Yep.
Right. And okay, first of all, let me just say that the Democrats need to understand that it is the Democrats who are going to impeach Cuomo. It's not the Republicans. And I'm hearing all this conversation about this is a Republican dirty trick. Republicans don't control the House, the Senate, nothing up in New York. Okay. So let's be very clear about that. And you're right. I mean, look, they couldn't, what would they do? They would have to purge everybody. They would have had to purge his entire cabinet. If he were impeached because of the nursing home thing, what would then happen is the party itself in the state of New York would collapse. Their view is, we're not going to do that. It's going to collapse now because of the sexual harassment allegations. And in fact, the Me Too movement is over. It's dead. He's killed it. It's going to be even more dead once he's impeached and removed. And that's the thing. You had, and in addition to getting help, and this goes back to the whole thing with CNN, his brother was his PR strategist relative to this, in addition to which he got confidential information while a journalist at CNN. My God, like, what else do you need? But CNN, you got Tubin on there still anyway, so why not? Pervert, whatever.
They have no standards. I mean,
there are no standards. And that's the issue, because I've heard a number of the folks on the left, women on the left in particular, talking about the fact that, get rid of him, but let's also talk about the Republican Party and the fact that you all have your own set of predators over there. Okay, I'm sorry. This is the folks who always say to us, enough with the whataboutism. And that's exactly what this is. Let's stay focused here. The fact is, the scumbags got to go.
Kara, before we move off of Cuomo, isn't it's sadly ironic that we were just last week talking about how bad conservatives were bashing Simone Biles, and not all conservatives, but there were a couple of high-profile conservatives that did some really stupid things over a position that from a bipartisan perspective, people said, you're out of pocket. It's almost as if some Democrat somewhere said, hold my beer. I got to go grab the attention now and do something really stupid against our values. And here we go. We have this report that's out there. It's not one woman. It's not two women. You got loads of women that were interviewed. Bingo. And it's a cultural thing from somebody that's supposed to be a Democratic leader nationally.
Yeah, well, I agree with Chris, and I disagree. I agree with Chris that the Me Too movement is over. I disagree with, excuse me, I disagree with who killed it. I think Hollywood killed it. I think that, I would say that I read a really great interview with Tarana Burke, who was the founder of the Me Too movement long before Harvey Weinstein. She was a Black woman who was experiencing sexual harassment in the theater industry and the corporate industry, and so she formed this organization to deal with it, and then Hollywood discovered it when the Weinstein stuff was going down. And so, like, Hollywood is a great PR machine. That's a few folks like Reese Witherspoon decided to hook up with Tarana and really, quote, support this movement. And Tarana said, when these women first came in, my biggest fear was that they would take this over, that they would weaponize this, and that they would morph this into something that was really self-centered and centered on Hollywood. And I thought that they would dilute the message. And then she went on to say some other like nice things about Reese Witherspoon and some of the other people, but you could tell the underlying thing was, yeah, that's exactly what's been happening. And
Wow.
who Tarana Burke is. They trotted her out to a few events, but she should be a superstar. She should be a person on every show, you know, and she's not. And then Hollywood took it over, and then it became a movement of, this guy told me I looked pretty on set. Me too, hashtag me too. And it killed the teeth behind this movement. So Chris is absolutely right. The movement has been killed, but by Hollywood. And you look at who all of Cuomo's defenders are, and like the women who have just worshipped him and worshipped at his feet. I mean, it's disgusting and despicable. And unfortunately, we predicted it right, that these left-wing liberals were going to kill Me Too, and that's what they did.
So speaking of kind of confounding messages to try to illustrate a point that's horrible, Jeff, I'm going to go to you first on this because this is perplexing to me. So the sitting mayor of Boston, Massachusetts, from Boston, he literally was in the media recently, and what she said was basically, look, we have a history of making people show their papers. So asking people for vaccination papers is not that big of a deal. Heck, there was a time that it was quite okay for people to have to show their freedom papers as Black people. And if we can do that, why can't we show vaccination papers? Now, I'm going to take myself off the screen for a second. I want you to take a good look and explain to me, as you start this topic off, why a Black woman would use freedom papers for slaves in a state where people would run into during the Fugitive Slave Act to snatch free people to try to justify vaccination passports and papers.
This is such an embarrassment. Like, I can't even wrap my mind around why somebody would even fix their mouths to say something like that. I mean, she's talking about freedom papers. Okay, it was a bad thing that they were needed in the first place. Like, don't you read history? Didn't you watch Roots? I mean, what kind of? I don't. She has to have misspoke. I mean, she has to. She probably. I have to give her the benefit of the doubt, because if I don't, I will go crazy. Like, I can't, if I actually could comprehend that level of stupidity, my IQ would drop. I would lose my mind. So I have to assume that maybe she was trying to make her point in a different way and she jacked up. I mean, because that just makes me lose my entire faith in humanity. And here's the thing. You don't use slave papers to justify vaccine mandates.
No, they were bad. We didn't like them.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing.
Dr. Metzler, chime in for just a second, because
that's what it was.
I'm going to ask somebody that's been a political consultant on something like this, because there's somebody that after Kim Chaney said this, somebody said, "Come here, have a seat, Madam Mayor. You know what were you thinking? What's the spin on this now, Chris? Now that she's put something out there like this and tried to connect it to birtherism and slave papers." At a time where people were already scared. And by the way, people were already sick of hearing about masks, no masks, vaccine papers, no vaccine papers, masking in school, not masking in school. People are fed up one way or another. They just want their lives back. So for her to say something like this is not politically wise, and it's not civically wise either, it wouldn't seem to be.
No. And so her only strategy or tactic that's available now is to change the subject. That's it. She has nothing else. There's nothing else. And do not say another word about it. Change the subject. Talk about the lives of Bostonians and how they're being affected by COVID. That's it. Baby girl, don't bring it up again. I mean, that to me was the most embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
I was just like, what, girl, what did you say? Like, it's kind of
Embarrassing.
Kira,
yeah,
Kira,
you just can't understand.
Kira, he almost said it. He was about to say the phrase that he wasn't allowed to say.
I admire the discipline. I did restrain from my Olympic challenge during the Cuomo discussion. I'll have you know.
Yeah,
You
all are all champions, which is why I have my son's participation trophy right here. Each of you will have one mailed to you. He actually won a real championship medal last year or last spring, but I do have participation trophies for you all, not for you all watching the show. We love you there, but you're not getting a trophy this week. Kira, what does one do once you put your foot in your mouth like this? And by the way, there are people that don't think she's putting her foot in her mouth, which is almost as bad as the fact that she.
Oh my God! Oh man, that makes it worse.
That makes it worse.
I don't know how you. I don't understand how you can defend it at all if you're just a thinking person. I understand partisanship and it can make us defend things that maybe we wouldn't otherwise, but this is stupid. I mean, she's stupid. Good for Jeff for wanting to give her the benefit of the doubt, but I've been around long enough. I mean, listen, there's a couple of things here. Number one is that this was an opportunity for her to help the group that is the most vaccine hesitant is Black people. Media is pretending that it's hashtag MAGA crowd. Most of the MAGA crowd is vaccinated. They're just saying we need like the freedom to choose. So that's not what it is. The Black Americans are the ones that are really causing the Blacks and Hispanics causing the lag in vaccinations. And so we need community leaders like her to give Black people a reason to go get vaccinated. Telling Black people that they're going to have to carry slave papers after they're vaccinated is not the way to convince Black people that it's a good idea to go get the vaccine. You know, it's just the opposite of everything that we need to happen here within the Black community to help encourage Black Americans to go get vaccinated. And that is the other leg of this stool that we're not talking about. The mainstream media is not talking about, and they're doing the Black community a disservice, which is what's going to end up happening is we're going to end up legally reinstating segregation because it's Black people who aren't going to get those papers. And then what happens? We're back to having to show papers to prove that we're free people. I mean, mind blown. Like, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. He doesn't have good staff around her, but also this is a problem when it comes to Black leadership in inner cities. We tend to vote for people who tweak our emotions instead of vote for people who are prepared for the job and who are educated enough for the job. That was a sign of an uneducated person. Don't get me started on Cori Bush and her dumbass.
It's interesting. Let me say this real quick, and then I'm going to pivot into the Olympics and make all three of you mad. Dr. Metzler, it's interesting, and I'm going to go to you, and then Jeff, and then back to Kira before we go to the Olympics, which is this. She was deputy mayor, like the number 2. Mayor Walsh ended up going to the Biden administration. Yeah. So here's the blend of how federal politics can, although usually they say don't pay attention to federal politics, all politics that affects you the most is local. That is true. But here's an example of how federal politics and your mayor being involved in federal politics ends up affecting your life at the local level. Yeah, we're talking more about a news story and a bad soundbite. But, you know, if there's a certain mindset to this, Dr. M, it leads to policy possibly, perhaps. And if she, depending on the model of civic engagement there, whether it's a strong mayor model or a strong city council model, this is somebody in their mindset that's driving policy going into a fall with the Delta variant might be driving a lot of the policy.
Well, for me, it's not a surprise. I mean, if you look at her entire political career. She was deputy mayor. Boston selected her. Even they were even thinking about the fact of getting Walsh out and putting her in, primarily because they wanted to show how progressive they are. So you have a Black mayor in Boston. So that's problem number one.
Black mayor that's advocating for slave papers.
Yeah,
Congratulations,
exactly.
everybody.
Yeah,
job.
and that's the thing. And number two, if you look at her career as a politician, if you look at a lot of the things that she said, a lot of the policy decisions that she's made for the city, they're asinine. I mean, so for me, this was not a surprise because this is a woman who just talks randomly. I'm like, can you try to invoke some muses or something? I mean, because at this point, I do think perhaps she is trying to invoke Cori Bush, but that's another discussion.
Yeah, she ain't very good at it. I mean, it reminded me of that, and I know I shouldn't expose the fact that I know about this, that episode of Real Housewives of Atlanta, when Portia thought that the Underground Railroad was actually underground. Yes. That's what it reminds me of. And like when I first even read, when you said that in the email, I read that, I was like, I know she didn't say it. I know that she had to have meant something else, and she didn't.
Lord.
And I don't like even conjuring what I'm going to say right now, because 9 times out of 10 it's stupid. But this is kind of what happens when you do like an affirmative action type of thing because you want to be so progressive.
Yeah.
It's stupid. Like she does not belong in that position. I'm sure she's good at something, but she ain't good at it.
Maybe like baking cookies or something.
Oh, wow.
Not like city leadership. No, it was embarrassing, Lenny. I'll tell you what, when I heard her say that, I was like, this is an embarrassment. You know what it reminded me of? Because Jeff's absolutely right. You know, affirmative. Sometimes in politics, these affirmative action hires are very thoughtless. There's plenty of talented Black politicians out there. But
yes.
But they don't go find those people. You know why? Because those people can't be controlled. Those people are too smart, right? They don't want an intelligent Black person leading one of the most major cities in America. You know, they want somebody that
look at our vice president.
There you go.
Remind me of when I used to run our after school program back in Gary, Indiana, and we used to be in this little like a strip mall.
Is that where you were learning your ABCs? Oh, I digress. You know I had to say it.
I've never heard a Michael Jackson joke before. Okay. But we were in a strip mall, and I mean, it's not saying anything that it was a bad area. I mean, like all of Gary is a bad area. So there was typically like some kind of high profile crime. Don't ask me why we had our children's program in this strip mall. It's where we could afford. That's where we were. We were always some kind of high profile crime in the strip mall. And so the news crews often would show up. Maybe once a month, there'd be a news crew in the parking lot to report on a robbery or something. And always we had these big picture windows, and we'd see the news crew, and we'd see who they were going to pick to ask questions to. It was always like the toothless wonder that was wandering around the neighborhood all the time, that didn't really have a home, that didn't really like, you know, we're like, no, not him. And we would push out our interns. We'd be like, you go out there, you talk to them, you go, don't let them talk to this person, you be the person they talk to. We would be
They do that on purpose.
They do that on purpose.
Yeah.
Like, we would be like, they found the dumbest, jankiest person in this parking lot, and there's an education center right here. And they would never come talk to us, you know? And that's what it reminded me of. It's like, why is this idiot out here? Someone please go out there. Like, there's got to be a better spokesperson for. And again, I have to go back, Lenny, to the fact that Black people are the ones who are vaccine hesitant. And if all of this screaming about how we're going to get to herd immunity and we got to do your part, these are messages that need to go out to the Black community. And they need to go in a way that Black people are going to feel at least like receptive to. And this lady just blew it. She blew her chance to speak some words of wisdom to a community that needs to hear it right now.
Well, and there are two things here. Going back quickly to Jeff's reference on the Underground Railroad. Remember what Harriet Tubman said about certain people who were on the Underground Railroad, because in this particular case, she would not have made it out of Harriet Tubman. So
I don't know. I mean, did Harriet shoot people because they were dumb, or I thought it was just people who wanted to go back?
well, it's a combination.
You're right.
It probably
Dumb
is.
enough to go back. If you're dumb enough to go back after we just did all this.
Right.
And I think to Kira's point, you know, when you have the crew out there, it's like, yo, that's baby them. Come here, baby.
Yeah.
How you?
Yeah. No.
It's like
we're right here. There are perfectly sentient, educated people
right
5 feet from you. Why are you choosing this person?
Yeah, and so do you want baby?
It's because they laugh at us. That's what's
Yeah,
they take our footage back and they laugh. That's what they're doing.
Because if there's an injury, what's gonna happen is baby or Jaquan is gonna call the ambulance.
Ambulance. The ambulance.
I'm just saying.
Can we talk about the Olympics now, please?
I mean, we could, but this is fun.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we just got done talking about the Special Olympics, so
Right.
By the way, shout out to my BFF's brother Tim, who was a gold medal Special Olympian.
Sweet.
Oh yeah,
He
there you
was
go.
back in the 80s. Yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So I'm gonna blame y'all conservatives for this, just because it's starting trouble, and I would like to do that as if I'm not a conservative. But I digress. Why is it so vogue to root against America now as an American in the Olympics? If I look back at Olympic history, and I'm going to start with you, Kira, because I probably can poke and push your buttons the fastest. If you look back at Olympic history, you probably haven't seen Americans rooting against Americans this hard since 1968, when there was all type of civic unrest and racial unrest. I'm going to throw out a theory that some in the audience may like, some will hate, and you will probably push back on 100% and want to kick me in the shins. Good thing I'm on the other coast.
Challenge accepted.
Which is this. This is the first Olympics since Donald Trump became president, and the country really got divided. It was getting more divided under President Obama, but between all of the social activism and the divisiveness that came under the Trump presidency, it made it very vogue to root against certain Americans, and now it's being highlighted on a worldwide stage in this Olympics with everything from Simone Biles to the U.S. Olympic women's soccer team. True or false?
I disagree with your assessment of that it's become vogue. I think but I do agree with your assessment is that it's become more political than ever. But I think you're placing the blame somewhere that I wouldn't place it. You're kind of placing at the feet of Trump and his vitriolic kind of nature or whatever and his supporters. But I would say that a lot of those supporters would be happy to root for the American athletes if the American athletes weren't becoming political themselves. So in a way, like, who do you blame? Is it the consumer, or is it the person we're supposed to be rooting for? I don't think a lot of people want to root against America. It does place the viewer in a weird position to like be actively rooting against the women's soccer team, but certain people in the women's soccer team have made half of this country feel like they don't count, like they're terrible people, like this is a bad country, that this country isn't worth representing. So what is somebody who loves America and loves to watch people represent America supposed to think when you see those people go and represent your flag, but all they do is insult your flag and all they do is insult you and your values? So I don't think it's, quote, Trump voters or Trump that have made this political. I think if those people kept their mouths shut, we wouldn't even be talking about this. I think it's the athletes and the athletic organizations that have made this political, and now Americans feel forced into a corner. But Lenny, if I'm going to have any point of agreement with you, I will begrudgingly say that sure, Trump has emboldened people to be maybe a bit more sassy or saucy about it than they need to be. But I don't think that this is something to put at the feet of the viewer. This is at the feet of the people who make sports political when all we want to do is watch our athletes.
But Jeff, isn't that the epitome of shut up and dribble? I mean, sports has always been political. I mean, look, when Joe Louis was fighting Max Schmeling before World War II, nobody had a problem with Joe Louis as an American beating a German. Nobody had a problem with the politics of Jesse Owens beating the Germans in Berlin in 1936. It's when black people put up a black power fist in 1968 when they have a problem. Or when the women's soccer team says we want equal pay than what the men's soccer team gets when it comes to being a national team. By the way, we're the ones that keep winning gold medals. What have they done for us lately? That's when people seem to get upset over the politicization of the Olympics. And we won't even go into professional sports we've seen this all the way back to Muhammad Ali and even Jackie Robinson towards the end of his career and after his career. We've seen people politicize athletics and entertainment forever in America. Isn't that not the essence of America?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to surprise you. I'm going to agree more with you, actually, because, yeah, sports has always been politicized.
I'm not surprised, you damn rhino.
Wow. Button pushed.
That's right. See?
I'll go ahead. Let's get a room then. Fine.
But here's my thing with this. Like, I'm not really into the Olympics like this, but I don't want us to lose. I don't care if I disagree with the politics of the players on the field. Yeah, some of them have views that I would find reprehensible, but I still want America to win. I want America to bring those gold medals back. So I can make fun of Megan Rapinoe and her purple hair and her stupid statements. I still want her to score goals and win. I can separate those two things. I don't really have much of a problem with people making political statements in sports because, like Lenny said, it's always been done. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree with what they're saying, right? So even with Kaepernick, I disagreed with the way he did what he did, but I didn't have a problem with the fact that he was making his political views known, because if it had been somebody else, or like say if it's Tim Tebow and he makes a political statement that we like, we're not going to tell him to shut up and run the ball. Like, so to me, it's not as big a deal as we're making it. I wasn't even mad at Gwen Barron. I mean, when I read her reasons for doing what she did, I was like, okay, I don't quite agree, but I understand where she's coming from. She didn't say that she hated the country. She didn't say that it was about disrespecting the country. She has a problem with one of the verses in the national anthem, and I think that there are some valid arguments on both sides of that. So to me, that's not going to be enough for me to say, yeah, I'm going to root for another country to defeat our teams and be happy about it. No, I'm not. And the idea that some of them are losing because they're woke, I know what Trump said. That's ridiculous. Being woke doesn't translate to your skill on the field or in whatever you're doing.
It can be a distraction. And I think that sometimes you take whatever, if you do politics on the side when you should be training and focusing, like it's the same way that happens to boxers. I'm a big boxing fan. And in the early 2000s, Lennox Lewis was a big boxer. When he got really big and he beat Tyson, in Holyfield, he became a big star, and then he started recording movies. He started appearing on TV shows, and it was like, who cares? Yeah, you should do that. But what happened was he ended up losing fights because you get distracted with what's going on in the public, and you're not there, which is kind of what happened to Biles, And so it can be actually can have an effect, I believe, on your performance if you're spending your energies outside of your
but Biles had a death in her family. That was part of what messed her up, number one. So she had that, and she did have all the pressure.
I can't see you. You're not on the screen.
I'm right here.
I can see him.
I'm here.
I see him.
My computer is just doing me a favor and blocking.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. That was very anti-American of you, Kira Davis.
That's because she's Canadian.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Simone Biles had a death in her family. Look, we've saw Muhammad Ali be extremely political and whip everybody's tail. Part of the reason why they didn't want Ali to win his title in 74 against Foreman was because Foreman waved the flag at the 68 Olympics, and Ali supposedly threw his gold medal from years back into the Ohio River. I mean, you constantly hear about these stories. Number one, let's just be honest, they usually center around black athletes standing up for African Americans' rights, asking for America to live up to its constitutional values when it comes to black people. That's where a lot of these problems come into play. And once again, whether it's Kaepernick back in 2016 and 2017, or further back. LeBron James.
I don't think that's fair either. It just because black people have more grievances, but if it's a white person, look at Rapinoe. You know, it's the same thing. We're treating her the same way. It's just that we don't see a lot of white folks doing this on the stands. So
generally speaking, though, we can't admit, though, right, that when it comes to the black athlete, Dr. Metzler, more often than not, is expected to entertain and smile and just be grateful to be there versus be a person while they're there if they have an opinion, as if their kids can't get pulled over by the police at 1 o'clock in the morning when they're driving an expensive car in the wrong neighborhood.
Well, look, for me, from a historical perspective, sports and politics have always been linked. I don't see this at all as a new phenomenon. I want America to win. I don't care what your political view is. I don't care about any of that. I want you to win, except if you're going against Grenada, but that's a different.
Yeah, here we go.
But in fact, I do think there is, my issue relative to, in particular, purple hair woman, Megan, my issue with her, I don't want to see you in the Victoria's Secrets catalog.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh.
I don't either.
Yeah, and I think what's happened is that the corporations have stepped into this, and I think in some places the athletes are going towards the corporation stuff, and it's all confusing because people look at her like, girl, I.
But is that not America? I mean, look.
Well,
but hold on, Dr. Metzler, I'm gonna let you reply to this. When you had Mary Lou Retton from small town West Virginia in 1984 win the gold, you had two things going on at the same time. Number one, she's a small town girl done good and on the box of Wheaties and everything else. But then you also had people trying to make an 18-year-old out to be this bombshell 30-year-old. And you got people sticking their fingers in the air saying, la, 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 she's a child. That was 1984. So again, that's not a new phenomenon either.
Well, but the difference here is this. 1984, you didn't have this level of corporate involvement. And by the way, you did not have the social media component of it. You didn't have Facebook. You didn't have in any significant way Instagram or any of those kinds of things. The relationship between the corporations and the athletes, to me, is a huge distraction. So I understand that they're inextricably linked, but for me, I want to see the sport. And every time I see you out there with the purple hair, and I'm thinking about the Victoria's Secrets, how they've redone that whole thing, and I just.
See, the other thing too is that Mary Lou Retton was hot. So I mean,
yeah, well, there's that.
So was an 18-year-old that was like 4'2" tall.
No, but she's old.
What? I mean,
okay.
She was a cute little Thumbelina. So I mean, if it was her, if that was happening today and it was her, then fine. I don't care about Victoria's Secrets. But when it's this purple haired chick, like,
yeah. I mean, admittedly, it's a jaded view, but.
Yeah, but Kara, are we not complaining about things that are in essence very American? Consumerism, capitalism, the freedom of speech,
well,
political diversity. I mean, these are all things that are supposed to make America the land of the free, the home of the brave, why everybody comes to this nation. And then when we get on the Olympic stage, if it's not exactly what we want them to say, now we bash it. Or if they're not consumerizing themselves the way we think they should, or they're in the wrong
So
venue,
I would
we
turn
complain
that
about it.
around on you, Lenny. Like, okay, great. It's American. Why isn't it just as American to be upset with your representatives on the field if they don't represent the flag the way you want them to, or they don't look the way you want them to on their $1 million campaign that is asking you to buy their products? What's the difference then? It's just as American. As you have pointed out all of these issues over all of years. You've gone through history to tell us that these things have been going on forever. Then I would say, okay, deal with it. Then this is how it looks. This is America. What's the difference between people being upset with their athletes for speaking up and the athletes speaking up?
So
Let
me answer the question. Number one, I haven't gone through history. That's Dr. Metzler's job. He's the person that always goes through history, not me. Number two, because he was there. Number two, the question that I put out there was not necessarily being upset or having an opinion. I don't care about that. What the question was very specifically, it's become Vogue. And I do believe I used the word Vogue, that 5-letter word.
You did use the word Vogue.
Thank you. And I dated myself by doing that, by the way. Jeff don't know nothing about that because he got the cute hairdo and ain't that old. With that said, though,
we're talking Madonna. I know what you're talking
he's
about.
old enough.
Well, there you go. But he looking suave this week. Yeah. I specifically said it's Vogue to root against those Americans on the Olympic stage, which I am saying only comes up every now and then and really has not come up since 1968 when you had the same level of domestic
that was the original question, but your defense, well, I'm responding to the defense that you just gave, which isn't this just part of America that these athletes do this and they stand up for what they believe in? That's the point you made as well. I mean, I know what the original question was, but the point you made, I'm responding to. Okay, great. You're right. It is American. So we got to deal with all of America, not just the parts that feel good to us. And sometimes part of being American is rooting against the people that you don't think represent your country the way you want them to.
Rooting against them at the risk of rooting for other countries doesn't seem to be very patriotic. I mean, that's where the conundrum is, right? So are you being more patriotic rooting against Americans that you don't think is representing America the way you like it to? Or is it more patriotic to root for Americans that you don't like, but they're still beating those evil Iranians in, Olympic basketball or whatever, or Olympic soccer? And then when you get them home, you take them to task by not buying their products, for not supporting them a certain way, or taking them to task in the media. What's more patriotic?
That's how you look at it. I mean,
I'm asking.
I'm not. But I'm trying to think of myself as one of those people who's rooting against. I mean, I'm not, but I'm trying to think of it from their position. And I'm thinking about all the people that I see on Twitter and all the people that I see commenting on my articles. And if I'm looking at it from their position, what I'm seeing is that they do feel like they're patriotic because that these people aren't representing the flag the way they want them to. And so, right or wrong, I understand that you don't like it. I understand that we might find it distasteful, but you have to understand that it's not that there are people out there who feel like, oh, I'm just going to try be unpatriotic. They do feel like they're being patriotic. That's how they feel, I think.
Jeff, and I respect your opinion. Jeff, I'm going to swing to you and Dr. M before we get out of here because we're starting to run out of time. But isn't this is kind of like the subjectivity aspect of what we're talking about with patriotism in modern day America, where it's like, okay, don't let the flag touch the ground, but they'll break the flag rules by making everything a flag, including their jacket, their tie, their napkins, their handkerchief, blowing their nose into the flag, but that's patriotic. But if I let the flag hit the ground in front of my house, somebody feels as though they can shout at me from the street. It seems like we're doing the same thing even with this, where it's patriotic to root against America in this instance, but how dare you root against America in another instance? It's almost like, okay, those are my Olympians, but those aren't my Olympians. Kind of sounds an awful lot like that's not my president, that is my president.
I think you just highlighted what we're dealing with now. And like I said last week when we were talking about Simone Biles, I think a lot of times we just react without thinking. Let's put the shoe on the other foot. Let's say Miss Purple Hair, Megan Rapinoe, was all about that MAGA hat. Let's see if she was wearing that MAGA hat and the whole team was more conservative. You would have people on the left rooting against that team, and you would have us calling them unpatriotic for doing that. So here's that's why I don't get as bothered by these things, because I know that when people react, a lot of times we're not really thinking, we're not listening to ourselves and actually reasoning as to why we feel this way. Because to me, I think most people could agree, okay, I want our team to win. I don't want, Iran to beat our soccer team. Let's beat them and then slam them when they get home. Because that's exactly what I'm going to do. I mean, I will blast the hell out of Megan Rapinoe and all the rest of them who were making political statements with which I disagree, because they have the right to say what they say and I have the right to make fun of it. So I think that really this just comes down to tribalism in a sense.
Yeah.
Dr. M, real quick, about 30 seconds. I'm going to ask you one final thing. Usually the Olympics unites America every 4 years. That's not happening this time. So if you have something like a pandemic that's not really uniting the country, and you have something like the Olympics that's not really uniting the country, and you have a president that is not going to do a very good job of uniting the country, and then you got governors like Andrew Cuomo that are dividing even his own party, where the heck are we going to go as a country moving forward? I know that's a big question for 30 seconds, but I lay it at your feet.
Well, where we're going to go is exactly where we are right now, a deeply divided country. That's where we're going. That's where we're going to continue to be. And look, I don't think that the job of the Olympics is to unite the country. I don't think that that's the job of the Olympics. I am not going to root against America and in favor of another country. But as Jeff adequately said, once you get back here, I'm going to talk about your ass. Mm-hmm. But for now, you do what you need to do. And that's the bottom line. And we cannot escape the influence of corporations and their wokeness and their woke challenges and all of these kinds of things on this particular Olympics. It gets worse every year. You're not going to see that, however, in Qatar in 2022. They're just going to play ball.
Well, it's a good thing I got something like this to read to help show me how to bring together a divided country. This pretty good looking dude, by the way. Pretty Kira's like, what the heck is that? I know the guy that wrote this, Kira. I think I can get you an autographed copy. Anywho, Kira, tell us about what you're working on this week. Very quickly, we got
guys. I'm sorry to interrupt, Lenny. I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't know what is happening, but now not only has Lenny's picture dropped out, his sound has dropped out for me. So I can only hear Chris and Jeff laughing, which sounds weird.
That happened to me last week.
Jeff,
I'm sorry. So I can't hear. So Lenny, I will let you close out for me, and I'll sit here dutifully until.
Well, no, Lenny's saying it's time for you to close out and let us know what's going on for you this week.
Okay, well then, in response to Chris's complaints about the new Victoria's Secret campaign, I think y'all would love to tune in to Just Listen to Yourself this week, where I interview Jeff Webb, who is a CEO, and we talk about woke capitalism and how that is kind of harming the consumer-corporate relationship. So that'll be a good one. Tune into that. Yeah. And outside of that, join me on davisnation.vocals.com for more access to Kira. And please like this show.
And not only, please do that. And on top of that, what we're going to do with Kira is we're going to basically show you that she became a gift. So we're going to close out the show with her being a gift. Jeff, tell us what you're working on real quick.
Yeah, so I still got a fresh perspective with Jeff Charles, the podcast, YouTube channel. Got a new audio podcast episode dropping really soon. Also, look for me on the Tammy Mack Show on Fox Soul over the next few weeks. I'm going to be filling in as a guest co-host for the person who's usually the conservative on their show for a few dates over the next couple months. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I'll keep you guys updated on that.
Fantastic. Dr. M, what are you working on this week?
Living Beyond the Realm, we're working on our digital platform rollout, so much more to come on that.
Fantastic. We lost Kira. Anytime you put up gift Kira and real Kira goes away, you still lose something. But, we can't close out the show without having Kira's face on here. So for all of us here in Red and Black, I'm trying to make sure I can pull up the gift Kira. And gift Kira doesn't want to come up anymore. You know how it is. When you get famous, people just start doing things. You know what I mean? Anywho, what you need to do, there's gift Kira right there. And she always gives me that face. We got that energy this week, so we all good. Listen, download the Kira Davis gift. It's fantastic. Check out Just Listen to Yourself. Check out her fresh perspective, Living on the Realm. Read the stuff that these folks are writing. And in the meanwhile, make sure you check out Red and Black every single week here.
Hit the subscribe button.
Hit the subscribe button. Share it with your friends. And like. You too can get a fresh perspective and a fresh haircut, just like Jeff Charles. Listen, y'all, you have a wonderful weekend. I'll talk to you soon. TCNGB. Take care and God bless everybody. Peace.